So on the table is Unmatched. I have 3 sets of it. I have Jurassic Park, the Dr. Sattler, and the T-Rex version. I have the Legends version, Volume 1, which is the first set that came out, and I have the Buffy the Vampire Slayer set. Does anyone else have any experience with Unmatched?
I have Epic Duels experience.
Okay.
Which is probably 20 years old at this point, and that's essentially what this game is based on. The original Epic Duels was a Star Wars game that plays very similar, supposedly, but it's on a grid. It's just on an old-fashioned set of squares, and this has these point-to-point movement dots.
All right, I've played Epic Duels as well with you a few times back in the day. And if I recall, so as you mentioned, it is played on a grid, and you have characters that have minions, much like this has characters with sidekicks. Like if you're Vader, you get 2 stormtroopers that go with him, right? And then General Grievous has a couple of...
Yep, Luke and Leia are together. Han has Chewie with him, so it's more or less the pairs that you would imagine from the Star Wars.
And it's a deck of cards that you play from. So you have a deck that you pull cards from, and you play attacks and defense cards against each other, and some special abilities. So in that way, the two are pretty much the same. Where I think this one differentiates the most is the use of the Tannhauser Pathfinder system.
Right.
So, Sam, why don't you kind of give us a brief overview of how the Tannhauser Pathfinder system works?
So, as I learned, it has nothing to do with the RPG by the same name. Instead, what I assume you're talking about are the color-coordinated spots on the map where they're connected by lines, and that's how you travel along them. You have to travel to a spot adjacent to yours and connected by a line. You can attack in melee if the spot is adjacent and connected by a line. But for ranged effects, you can hit anyone on the same color as you. You don't need line of sight or anything like that. It's just, are they on the same color spot? Which is pretty neat. It's
it's a way to abstract out line of sight.
Yeah,
so
not any argument comes completely out of the picture.
Yeah, it's not like, oh, well, if I draw the line this way, I can see your toe, but if I draw the line this way, I can see your pinky.
You can't see me. You can't see the musket man over there through the orc's legs.
Right, or around the corner of a doorway. For indoor stuff, it's always the corners of the doorways that screw up line of sight, and you have to try to figure out how that works.
So yeah, you got a couple of the circles that have 2, and on some of the boards 3 different colors, and if you can match the colors up, you're in the same zone. So you might have spaces that are within 3 different zones. It makes figuring out line of sight and zones of control a lot easier. Like you can almost just tell it from a glance, where in other games, like you said, you're pulling out a ruler, or if you're like really crazy into it, you're pulling out a laser pointer. But hey, it's like HeroScape, where if you can see it, you can see it, and that's like as simple as it can get.
Yep.
So I enjoy this system. It makes the maps a little confusing to look at, where you kind of have to take a second to decipher what the setting is actually supposed to be. The one we have on the board right now, I think, is there's an outside area and then 2 buildings.
It's called the Bronze. It's from the Buffy set. It looks like I think it's a school gymnasium.
Really?
And
but it looks like it's got a catwalk over top of it.
It's something.
It's something. Maybe it's
I thought it was a dance hall.
Maybe it's a cafeteria. I don't know.
I thought it was a bar.
It's not really selling that
but
aspect of it.
there's a graveyard on the outside. It looks like it.
Okay, I see the graveyard.
I don't know.
You got to look really close to see what it actually is.
I think this one in itself is just confusing because a lot of the other ones, the layout is a lot more.
Yeah, they appear brighter too. The colors here are pretty dark.
Yeah, regardless of making it out, mechanically it looks interesting, where you can see there's like isolated areas where you can see you chase somebody down, or you go up onto this thing I thought was a catwalk, and there's a spot in the middle. You have to go all the way around to get to somebody there, and you can go underneath of it, and that's neat. There's mechanical interest there, even if visually it's kind of confusing.
I think it's just this map.
Okay.
Yeah, because look, if you look at the other ones, it's a lot more apparent what is next to each other.
Yeah, and the colors
fair.
are much brighter, so it also jumps off the table. It calls your eyes to it a whole lot better too.
All right, so
we just happen to be playing the night scene from Buffy.
So Chris is out of town, and instead we have my neighbor Ed. Ed has joined us today. Say hey, Ed.
Hey.
Yeah. No. He said, "Say hey, Ed."
Hey, Ed.
There you go.
Thank you.
Good job.
I like how all the characters are different. They felt thematic. It felt like Sinbad was a little weird, if I remember correctly. But
Yeah, so we've only
They were
played
neat.
with 4 characters. So of the 10 characters, we've only played 4. So we're gonna try to play 4 different ones so that we get a better idea of, what each character brings to the table. So in our last game, I played Medusa, who's this ranged fighter who can pretty much like pluck away at anybody on the board. It seems like
I remember 1 damage a turn, no matter what.
1 damage a turn. That was nice. But then when I could get in and get the combo going, I could hit you really hard. I think I hit you for like 7 one turn,
Yeah, it wasn't fun.
which is real nice.
I mean, I healed for 5 next turn, but
Yeah. And then she also discards cards from your opponent, which is another aspect of this game. It's there's a card management to this that isn't as apparent when you first start playing, but becomes more apparent as the game progresses. Because
It was decisive in
So in
the
that
game.
in that last game we
Was,
played,
yeah.
it was the deciding factor, because what ends up happening is you need cards in your hand to be able to attack and to defend, and if somebody is discarding your cards for you, well, you're losing options. And at the same time, if you are on the attack and you don't have any attack cards, you just have a bunch of defense cards, well, all you can really do is move and hope to draw another card. So there's this whole card management system that goes along with it that I find to be very fascinating, because as we know from Heat, I really enjoy hand management and deck management type of systems. Is that the T-Rex?
yeah, I was looking at the T-Rex that has 27 health.
Yeah, it's kind of
And
crazy.
the darkest wheel ever,
Yeah, it's a
which
super
is
dark wheel,
virtually
yeah.
impossible to read.
Yeah, not a very great wheel.
Yeah, well, he
Wow.
doesn't have any sidekicks, so...
The to that point on card management, that bit me in the end last time we played, in that I was King Arthur dealing out whopping amounts of damage.
Oh yeah, big amounts of damage
And
burning through cards.
right, and that only at the end did I realize that I could no longer move without taking damage.
Yeah,
And I guess I just let my, Romano-British warlord feelings take over and chase you across the map when I should have just run the other way
yeah.
and let attrition take you first, because you had less health than I did.
Yes, so I was playing as Dr. Sattler from Jurassic Park, and I convinced King Arthur to chase me into the corner and then delivered a knockout punch. But
all he had to do
close.
was take a seat and take a breather, and Dr. Sattler would have killed herself for him.
Yeah, I had 1 health, so the second I ran out of cards, I was done. Whereas I think you would have made it another turn.
Yes.
You had, because you had 5 health, so you would have taken 4 damage and gone to 1 health, and I would have been on the other side of the board from you with one card and 1 health.
And then John had Sinbad, who I think normally, with a decent shuffle of your deck, would have been an interesting character in that he gets more powerful as he plays the Voyage cards. But
Well, I think he would have been a more powerful character.
Yeah.
But just in general, if I recall correctly, he was a bit of a blunt instrument. He's a guy in the middle swinging a big sword.
Didn't
So-
think he was terribly interesting.
Wasn't terribly interesting. So I'm looking forward this time to playing somebody that's got a little bit more creativity to
I mean,
him.
that's-
a little more
Back
that's-
on the T-Rex route.
Something tells me the T-Rex is a pretty blunt instrument too. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good point. I'm
That's-
thinking maybe Willow this time,
that's-
because she was a wizard in the show, so hopefully she's got some interesting things.
and she's
going.
got that Dark Willow dichotomy thing that looked interesting. I haven't played her, but I've looked through her cards and I've read things online about it. And of all the Buffy characters, that one is the one that interests me the most to try.
Yeah.
That's fair. They all seemed pretty interesting. Of the 4 that we played, they all seemed pretty interesting, except for Sinbad, whose thing mostly seemed to be play cards,
Head
and
down
if you
and swing.
survive into the end game, you get stronger. Whereas King Arthur had to deal with card management, and Medusa and Dr. Sattler were all about positioning.
Yeah, I mean, I've played Sinbad like at least 4 times online. I really think that the card draw that you had kind of that's what soured your experience, because you got one voyage out, and then the second voyage that you drew, and essentially the only one that you drew for the rest of the game was the one that reset the voyage. It didn't make sense for you to restart it at that point. So it was
Well, that was last time.
yeah, that was last time.
That was last time. You want to see what happens next time?
Yeah, I think well, I don't think any of us are going to pick Sinbad. I think we all need to pick new characters just to
I think the 4 we played last time are off limit.
Any other parting thoughts before we get into the game here? All right, awesome. Well, we're going to play, and we'll be right back. All right, so Unmatched is done.
All right, so I played Willow.
Yes, you played Willow. How do you feel about Willow, John?
Oh, I was gonna. Do they know who we all played?
I was the T-Rex, because why the hell not?
It did seem like a lot of fun.
It did.
You know, I could have done without the killing myself part and just like a smaller health pool, but at the same time, it was interesting. The using your health as a resource was kind of an interesting take.
I liked how you were essentially you were a boss monster.
Mhm.
Right? Like, you totally changed the way the game played. You weren't an equal competitor. At least it didn't feel that way to me. It felt like, okay, there's the T-Rex. Get away from it. Run away, because all of his cards say boost, and they all deal like 8 damage. Just go hide in a corner, and eventually he'll fall asleep.
Well, and with him standing in the very middle of the map, he could just kind of swing his head this way and that, and
Yeah, and
virtually own the entire
This was a
space.
bad map for
Yeah,
you guys.
I have
interesting
to say
dynamic, but
that
the map didn't help.
The T-Rex teleportation card seemed a little OP and weird.
Yeah, that
and
was a little...
I hesitate to say it's a broken card. It might have been broken in this particular map, but it was just, you've got, all right, so the T-Rex's base move is 1. So you've got this plodding along double-based figure that can attack 2 spaces away, but can only move 1. And to move more, you're drawing more cards, and the T-Rex draws his own cards as it is. So eventually you're going to run out of cards and start having to deal damage to yourself, which I got right on the cusp of having to do. I thought it was interesting how I could only move 1 space.
I think they had to give you a teleport
But then
card.
there was that teleport card. Well, I mean, you can boost to move more. But that teleport card it seemed a little weird. It seemed a little out of place, but I mean, I enjoyed using it against you guys.
Right, and from a setting perspective, why on earth does a T-Rex have a boost card? I mean, or why does he have a teleport card?
It's
Just,
a
it seems like an
stealthy
odd-
T-Rex.
Yeah,
He's
because
coming
he
out of
shows
the
up.
bushes.
He
Yeah, that's
shows
it.
up suddenly, and they don't realize he's there. And frankly,
Yes, they didn't realize the 6-ton animal that smells like an elephant is hiding behind the stop sign where you don't see it.
Well, it was raining, so
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I mean, so it's thematic, right? Like, regardless of how realistic the T-Rex being sneaky
T-Rex
is
fighting Alice from Alice in Wonderland. We're
Yeah.
gonna suspend
There
her
you
just
go.
a little bit.
thematically,
That's
the
firmly
T-Rex
grounded in.
Yeah. So thematically, the T-Rex shows up unexpectedly and jump scares people, right? That's what the card is. It just so happens this map is incredibly interconnected.
It's very small.
It's very claustrophobic. There's
Unless you're on that parapet up top. This is where you guys were safest.
right,
up
but
there.
but even then, I mean, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Right, and the T-Rex can
7.
reach 2 spaces, so there's
Yeah.
1 space that you can hide on the parapet in each direction. Other than
Yeah,
that, he can
it
still
just,
grab you.
especially with the zone hopping teleport card, you could get anywhere.
I mean,
So-
if you're in the middle, you've got blue you have access to, you've got green that you have access to, you've got white that you have access to. It's really the blue and it's really the brown and the light purple that you kind of have to maneuver at I guess in the light yellow over there that you
Yeah,
kind of have to
and-
maneuver around. But
In a perfect world, we could have dodged you pretty easily, but
even still, even if you're not, even if I can't get to those colors, I'm usually close enough to be able to melee attack you 2 spaces away. So.
or I'm in one of those spaces keeping them out of there. Right.
Yeah.
That was something I think really
so you
played.
Spike?
Yes, I was.
I think
was
also
Spike
from Buffy.
with Drusilla. Yeah, I've never seen the show, so you guys will have to tell me. Looks like he's maybe like a.
He's a vampire.
Is he a vampire?
He's a vampire.
Good
with
vampire,
a
bad vampire.
spiky, shocking white haircut.
Okay.
Is that
And,
James Marsters?
I don't know the name of the actor that plays it, but the show was very witty dialogue and very quick, and even the bad guys are sort of lovable in their own sort of way. So that's the kind of role he was. He was a baddie, but it's kind of hard to get all upset about the baddies in Buffy.
So I think Drusilla had a couple of extremely powerful cards. She was Spike's minion, where I just kept discarding all of your cards, Sam. Just over and over.
I lost 4 cards to that in this game, where that's really important. And frankly, like, I think the T-Rex was very well designed, actually. Like, as far as boss characters go, where one player is stronger, but they're on a timer, they have to chase down the other side and end it before their strengths turn into a liability. I think that's really cool. I love it when games do that.
Mm-hmm.
But Spike felt weird to me because it was like you have these shadow tokens that your cards incentivize you to play around, and you're supposed to lure people onto them. You're stronger when you fight near them. And that's cool, but it felt weird to me that you could just put them down at the start of your turn.
Yes, I mean, it didn't help. See, Spike had to get stuck in, right? He has to be in there in melee against everybody else. And you guys were all ranged.
Well, no, John was ranged. I was all melee.
You were all melee? Well,
Yeah.
I only fought you towards the end. So
Yeah.
I spent most of my time fighting John.
From my perspective, it felt weird because it felt like your character was... It felt like when you described him, it was like, okay, so he's going to put down these traps and try to create a favored terrain that you have to like lure him out of. And you have this back and forth where positionally you have characters that want to run all over the map and so on. He's a character that wants to like claim a piece of the map and you have to skirmish in and out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't what happened. It was just you just made your favorable terrain wherever you went on your turn. It was more of a, if you ended your turn next to him, bad things happened.
Yes.
Which was a...
Pretty easy to avoid.
Well, if you're ranged.
Right.
If it's melee, I don't have a way to avoid that, right?
If you want to attack.
I either start my turn away from him, or I end my turn away from him, but I can't do both unless I just don't interact.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is a weakness in the design. I think it's not an interesting decision point. It's just an on-off, when do I want to take this hit?
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting in that the shadows themselves don't hurt you.
Yeah.
They're triggered off the card, so it's not always do I stand in the shadows and take damage. It's do I stand in the shadows and look at his hand and see that he's low on cards, or just hope that he doesn't have any cards because he's played some shadow cards. So there's a little bit.
Oh yeah, I mean they presented an interesting decisions for Spike,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you had all these cards that triggered based on the shadows. You had to think about that. From the opponent's perspective, there wasn't really a lot of interaction there.
No.
Because you got to put the shadows wherever you wanted at the start of your turn.
Mm-hmm. Well, they had to be on my character.
Yeah.
So if you were next, like you said, if you were next to me at the end of your turn, bad things would happen because I would just immediately put down a shadow on my character.
Yeah.
And then attack you and get the benefits
right,
from...
and as a melee character with 2 actions, I can run up to you and attack you.
And end your turn next to
And
you.
end my turn next to you, or I cannot interact with you.
Right.
Because unless you come to me, then I can attack you and run away. But that's kind of a limited...
Yeah, they didn't...
design, or limited interaction.
So I'm wondering, because it says at the start of your turn you may place a shadow token in any space adjacent to Spike or Drusilla. So not in the space with them unless Spike or Drusilla is next to Spike or Drusilla.
Right, but there were a bunch of cards that I had in my hand that were like, put one on you. Okay. Right. Well, yeah, so the same point, right? Like if you ended up next to me, I would just put it on your person.
Yeah, I mean, that happened to me like 3 or 4 times. I think every time I ended the turn next to you, it happened, and it was...
Well, I mean, it's kind of like when you were playing Dr. Sattler. Like, you just... Every time you moved her or Dr. Malcolm, you put the other tokens down.
The magic healing tokens.
That's true. The
and
difference...
all that really was doing for you was like putting a resource, making you move so that you could put a resource on the board to then use.
Yeah, so that was a little different because the insight tokens that the scientists put down just incentivized me, the player playing as a scientist, to move around. I wanted to move every turn if I didn't have the maximum amount of tokens out there, right? There were a couple cards that turned them into traps, but there were only I think 2 of those in the whole deck, compared to Spike's cards where you had basically your whole thing was turning the shadows into traps.
Well, yeah, or they gave me some other advantage. I mean, having played it, I found the shadows to be somewhat underwhelming. Like, they were really helpful when they were really helpful.
Yeah.
But most of the time, to your point, it was about trying to position you guys in a place where I could put down the shadows and take advantage of them. But half the time, as you said, you're trying to stay away from me. So I've got to chase after you to either end my turn next to you.
It was a very binary decision space. It wasn't terribly interesting.
Agreed.
With the scientists, it was, okay, I want to move every turn. That's what I want to do. I want to move around. I want to go to different places so I can put more tokens down. And with Spike, I just felt like the shadows didn't have that.
No.
They felt a little boring in comparison, where it's like, okay, they do cool stuff, but frankly, the cards may have well just said, do this thing without worrying about the shadows a lot of the time. John, you played what? Willow? What was Willow's thing?
Willow kept bringing people back to life, which she can do 4 times.
All I wanted to do is kill a Jabberwocky and keep it dead.
The Jabberwocky never came back.
Yeah, it did.
No, it didn't.
No,
It was the first thing that came.
No, it was Terra.
It was Terra, and then I brought back Alice twice,
yeah.
and I had another card where I could do it again because I can go and fishing in my discard. So once I've played a Resurrect card, I can bring it up again. So that's sort of odd. And there's a bunch of cancel cards, but I think everybody has cancel cards, which we sort of.
I think we all have feints.
Yeah, we in our group we have an unwritten rule that cancel cards are canceled. We're not a big fan of those.
I didn't know about this rule.
Yeah. So I like them a lot because I like them a lot.
Well, they seem to prolong things, and you think you've got an angle, you think you've got something working, and it just doesn't. So she was mad. She was ranged. She could do some solid attacks, and she had some odd magical effects, and she sort of has this duality. Which I'll be honest with you, I don't think I think they needed to play good Willow and bad Willow. Instead, it's bad Willow and then everything else counts. Mm-hmm. So from that perspective, I'm not sure they wrung her out as much as they could have. I think they could have made it more interesting.
Bad Willow and boring.
Bad as an evil, not as bad as
in general. The game does not lift off the table. It didn't come to life when I played with Sinbad. He seemed like a big hammer, and you used him like a big hammer, and that was Sinbad's thing. And Sinbad was actually kind of a cool guy in the movies. I mean, he sort of managed to find a way out of everything, and he wasn't just a guy swinging a sword. And Willow in the show is a far more complex character than probably anybody else. Not that matters a whole lot for the game, but I just don't. The way the 2 maps that we have played on so far played out, I think the map just isn't that important a feature of the game. It's about the card play, because it's so easy to get up next to the person you want to. There's no real favored ground.
I disagree totally. I think the maps were actually hugely important.
No.
Okay. I think the games would have been totally different if we'd played.
Okay, so here's the 3 games that I'm thinking of as I'm playing this. The first one is Heroescape, which we did last week, and don't tell me that this map is within 100 miles of being as critical as the way the maps play out in Heroescape. Now, Heroescape.
I'll agree with you there.
Heroescape is a $100 game getting used. I mean, it was a $34.99 game for the basic set, but the map in Heroescape allows you to be in a place where you are stronger than your opponents. You have better cover, you have more height. There's something there that makes you in a better position. In this, it's more about, well, how do I weasel my way around to get to somebody? And in this particular play, with the T-Rex being able to reach 2 spaces, you could just kind of stand in the middle and swing your head and get to largely every space on this particular board. And I don't know.
Yeah, this board
is the Memorial board for anybody who's listening out there in TV land. So you can see there's this bunch of spaces in the middle, all of which are blue, and then there's blue on the spaces around as well. So all of those are in your zone. So the T-Rex is not only able to do his teleportation trick and go anywhere he wants.
He also had that thrash move.
Right, he's right, and then he can reach the distance, which makes him that he doesn't even need to do that. He's that much closer. So that's game number 1. Game number 2, which is on my short list, is the Buffy the Vampire Slayer from Hasbro from 20 years ago, where the map is everything because you barricade buildings to keep the baddies out. I mean, there's places where you can set up defense or you can set up offense, and the game becomes much more interesting from that perspective as well. And then the final one is the Epic Duels, which is what this is based off of, which doesn't have this point-to-point movement. Instead, it's just a grid. Mm-hmm. And the maps have a little bit of interest to them. They're not just a big square grid. There's spaces where, in true Star Wars fashion, there's like a drop that goes down 1,000,000 miles because every film has some place where people
somebody can
plunge
fall
to their doom. All right, so there's no squares there, so you need to work around those. So you end up with these pinch points in the map where, again, people can set up a defensive position. And I'm trying to figure out, I'm just looking at this map, put my glasses back on, is there a place where 2 or 3 people could set up and say, I'm on defense and nobody can reach me here? Now, with the T-Rex, the answer is no, because he can reach 2 spaces. So he can just reach over top of anybody he wants.
I mean, this is a pretty defensive position. And I'm pointing to the map. I'm sorry, everyone can't see it, but there's one spot that goes from the middle of the garden area to the outer ring.
Right.
That
at the top of the board.
At the top of the board or the bottom of the board, depending. Well,
no,
at the top of the board. Sorry. That you could, if you held, you could cut off effectively like six pieces, six spots.
And that's what they made their last
but they can come in on the left and the right. And
but it's going to take them a while to get there.
Yeah,
All I'm saying is, like, I agree with you that, this isn't the type of map that provides favored ground per se, but what it does is it divides the map up into sections to that.
I'm thinking this game has more in common with Magic the Gathering than it does with HeroScape or Epic Duel.
So I have to say my opinion is totally different from yours, John. Frankly, I love HeroScape. It's a lot of fun. The terrain's really nice to look at. But as far as like actually playing the game, I don't know that I'm never terribly concerned about how to get somewhere. It's really just, am I melee? I'm going to walk in a straight line to the opponent and try to find somewhere that I'm taller than them.
Well, that's
what you do here.
Finding somewhere that's taller than them is what we're talking about.
Right, but that's not
because that's extra dice that you're getting.
Sure,
to roll.
it's a cool mechanical effect, but it's not a terribly interesting decision. I'm never like, which way do I go?
So
I just walk there.
What decision is this board providing you at all?
This is interesting because of how everything's connected, and how you have to flank around and go different ways. Because, like you said, this is primarily a card game where you have to draw cards to be able to attack and defend. But when you draw a card, you move. You don't have to move, but if you move, you're forcing the other player to also move to catch up with you, probably. Right? And so movement also becomes a defensive and offensive consideration, where it's not just, okay, I'm going to go stand here and I get a +1 die. It's, okay, I'm going to go stand here, and then on his turn,
he's going to walk up to you and hit you.
He's going to have to walk up, but that's...
You're taking one attack away from him.
You're taking one attack away from him, right?
But you're also
costing
losing
you one attack to do it.
But maybe that's a good trade-off.
Yeah, especially if I've laid down smoke bombs everywhere.
Right, or maybe I'm ranged and I'm going to go around. I mean, like we spent, like the other time we played where Steven was Medusa, I spent half the game trying to get up to Medusa on the catwalk, and I couldn't because the Harpies were blocking everything. Because the movement was an interesting, important part of the game.
That is the one time that I think this game proved anything of interest was when he had 3 outriggers that could essentially defend him on 3 different paths. So I will give you that. Now, they're one-hit point creatures, so they go down pretty quick.
Yeah, and that was fine. That was the point. And then in this game with the T-Rex, I mean, sure, everything was interconnected, but I think that was a strength of this map. I think the T-Rex would have been much more boring on the map we played the other time, where you had very clearly defined zones and buildings, and everything was a lot more one color, because we would have just gone in a big circle and the T-Rex would have chased us around, and it would have been like, all right, goodbye, Steven. You can't teleport in front of us now, so we're going to see you in 4 turns. Have fun with your card draw.
Yeah, I'm listening to your conversations. I'm curious as to how much also who you selected plays into the question of terrain versus not terrain, right? So
yeah,
like
that's the point.
In this one, right, with Steven in the middle, right, sort of controlled you guys to have to go on the outside, right? While I then used my pieces to either try to isolate you one at a time, or drive you in one direction or the
you
other.
were kind of skirmishing on the outside.
And
Right.
John, both of your characters were ranged. And with the way the board's set up, you basically didn't have to move to attack, I think,
I didn't have
at
to do
all.
anything.
You just sat there and
That's why I'm saying.
shot away.
That may be part of the
Because
reason why I thought it was boring.
Because you're ranged. I was all melee, so I had to like pick an avenue and be like, all right, I'm going to get to here.
I was all melee last time, and it was more a matter of either I can move or I can't. And it's either there's availability there, or there's not. There just isn't. With HeroScape, there's a wide open field, and you really get some choices as to where you want to be and how you want to work it. And in this game, that just doesn't seem to be available.
I guess with HeroScape, in my experience, once the pieces clash, that's kind of where the game ends. That I've never seen it go where you like shift back and forth and move around. Whereas in this, like we fought all over this map, and it's a smaller map, but I thought it was really cool how like we went over the bridge and under the gate and around the different sides and through the middle and just all over the place.
All right, so John made the point earlier, and I kind of agree. Like, this is more the main running gear and the main pull to this game isn't the map and the moving around on the map. It's a part of it, but I really think that this game is about the card play and the hand management and being able to manage your deck and your cards.
And losing 2 cards for standing next to the wrong person.
Yes.
Yeah. So
or just getting your stuff canceled when you play it.
Yeah, the cancel cards.
The next time we play this, we'll remove the cancel cards.
We have the unwritten rule. I would say remove 1 from each deck because I think everyone has 3
Everybody's
Fang
got
cards.
3 of them. Yeah.
The no cancel card rule was developed because of Civilization, where like
You could spend 2 or 3 turns
you could
building
spend
a
2
wonder.
or 3 turns to build up to one action that could then be canceled, and you've completely. It completely hoses and derails your game. So, something like this, it's just a simple card play.
It seems to be a way to extend the game by 10 minutes without providing anything that's particularly interesting.
Yeah.
There's no real value add to it.
Yeah, and if it was something like, if you lose this combat, cancel, I would be more okay with it than just completely cancel.
Yeah, if you put a couple if then else's into the picture where that sort of mixes there, then I think that would be more interesting.
Yeah, but all that to go back and say, like, I like the idea of the map. I think that having the T-Rex on this particular map probably is part of what is souring the whole idea of the map. I think if I had a single-based figure that didn't have reach, and was having to do the same types of maneuvers that everyone else at the table was having to do, I think it would have had a different experience. But I think with just the tight cluster of spaces in the middle and then the reach that the T-Rex had kind of negated a lot of the interesting aspects of this particular map.
That's fair. And I agree with you that the map is really a complement to the card game.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting one. Like it's kind of the spice that brings it all together. I don't think it'd be a terribly interesting card game on its own.
Yeah.
But
it's almost like how we said with, Arc Nova, the map is really just a secondary cost.
I
would put
agree.
this like just a degree higher than a secondary cost to play your cards. Because there is the where you are does matter. We're in Arc Nova. Yeah, you get bonuses for places that you cover up, but once you've done that, like, it doesn't matter.
I would almost say this is kind of the same type of idea where the map isn't the primary thing you're playing the game with, but it's important. You need to have it there. I think this is done really well.
Yeah.
I like this implementation of a map.
Mm-hmm. And, and it worked really well on Tannhauser, even though we played it maybe one time, and I think at the time, even then, there was some questions to
conceptually, the idea of the way the map works is interesting. I think the biggest thing, just looking at it, I'm like, why is this map so small? I mean, and I realize you want people close, but in a game where you win by attacking, people are going to find their way to get close. They could have just made it bigger.
Or you win by running the other direction.
Well, okay, so that's a
I'd
problem
be curious
in the rules.
Much larger or smaller it is. I think it's just the design of it. Or do you mean all the maps for all the...
I mean,
this map is very interconnected. The other map, you could actually be on the other side of the map from someone. This one's kind of circular.
Right.
And so I just pulled out the map that came with Jurassic Park.
Is it one-sided?
It's one-sided. So the Jurassic Park set is 2 characters with 1 map, where the Buffy and
it's a half expansion.
It's a half expansion.
I think even half a map.
So that's what,
so it's
5
half,
colors maybe?
It's physically smaller.
It's physically smaller, but it's
Oh,
only
it is.
it's only for 2 players. So we couldn't have played 4 people on that map.
That makes sense.
But I think what you see is it's definitely not as interconnected as the 4-player map that we played on. So I could see where
It's kind of 2 regions.
on the T-Rex paddock map, I can see where you are on the map would play as the T-Rex would play more of a role than it does in the map that we just played.
Yeah.
This is a very interesting map for just 2 people. The T-Rex wants to be in the middle.
It wants to be in the middle, and there's enough distance here that if they're on one side, it can't get them.
So yeah, I think maybe the choice of the T-Rex on the memorial probably maybe broke the game just a little bit, but
I mean, I still really enjoyed it.
I mean, I had a great time. It's like you said, sometimes you worry about having the quote unquote boss figure, and I think that everything came together really well with the T-Rex to where it wasn't so insurmountable for you guys to overcome.
Yeah, I mean, I was worried about the T-Rex, but frankly, the thing that frustrated me the most this game was losing the 4 cards to Spike's thing. That felt cheap, where it's just like, okay, you started your turn next to him, lose 2 cards. And it's like, okay, all right, well, that's cool.
Twice.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's interesting is, even though the T-Rex felt very large and powerful on the board, King Arthur's doing the same kind of damage.
Oh, yeah.
Alice in big form is still doing the same kind of damage. And had John been able to progress Sinbad with his voyages, he would have still been doing the same kind of damage. It just, the way that it's presented thematically gives you that feel, well, this is a big dinosaur going on.
I think also you had a lot of cards that said, draw more cards, take more actions, keep doing things.
Yeah, I did. So yeah, I did have the benefit of a couple extra actions as the game went through.
Well, and in this game where you need a card to defend with, like, that's a big deal, right? If you attack me, 2-3 times, well, if I don't defend, I'm probably going to be dead.
Yeah.
So now I have to defend. And then on my turn, I've probably taken a little bit of damage, and I don't have very many cards. So now I feel like I'm on the back foot and like I'm on the run. Even if, you're also hurting for cards, it doesn't feel that way because you're just going to draw them again on your turn.
Yeah, I thought the T-Rex deck was extremely well constructed.
Yeah, I thought it was really well done because there was a cost to you doing that, but you had such a big health pool at the beginning. It was like, ugh. The T-Rex looked fun.
Yeah, I had fun with him. I won't play him for a while just because
Plenty else to choose from.
we've got 10 figures. I've played 2 of them.
See what, Buffy and this purple dude with a sword?
Buffy and Angel.
Okay.
Those are the 2 that didn't get played.
Yeah. Buffy looks like she just punches things in melee.
Yeah,
She's a little faster.
She's a
That's what she
stabby.
was in the TV show too.
Yeah. She's a melee stat check.
Yeah, and then
she's fast.
And then you can kind of customize her deck by which sidekick you add with her. So you can have one that is draw cards, which is the Smarty Pants Giles, or you could add who's the other one? Xander, who is a little more of a beat stick and will hurt your opponents. But it's of all of the figures that we did play or we have played, I don't really see one as more outstanding than the other at this point.
Oh,
I don't know. I thought King Arthur was pretty powerful.
Yeah.
King Arthur seemed pretty cool. And I suppose for the record, I played Alice from Alice in Wonderland, and her thing was she can shapeshift to be better at attacking or defending, and her cards had a lot of movement tricks that I made some use of.
Alice has a lot of mobility, and then she has the ability to shrink and to grow, so the eat me and the drink me. If you're in big form, you get extra attack. And if you're in little form, you get extra defense. And the different cards switch you back and forth, so it's really interesting being able to manage.
Neat to kind of go back and forth. And Angel, the other guy we didn't see, his special ability is when he loses a combat, he draws a card. So more cards in the deck,
which could be a curse, as we've learned with the T-Rex.
True. In both games, your deck running out, someone's deck running out, ended up being a significant concern. And frankly, I think I probably could have kited out this last game long enough for it to become a problem for both of us.
Potentially, yes. I mean, the fact that I still had 2 characters with substantial amounts of health might have been able to box you in, but it would have been much more of a pain.
Yeah, it would have been interesting. As it was, I decided to just kind of run in and punch you. But
all right, so I think we've covered all of the characters that we have access to at this point. There's still, I don't know, half dozen sets out there with probably another dozen and a half characters that we haven't played. So maybe one day we'll get to them. But I think now is the time that we do the thing. As always, we're going to use the staple, the BGG 1 to 10 rating scale. How are we gonna do this?
Well, you guys won.
So we won. Okay, so Ed was the last man standing. Ed is our guest tonight.
Yes, thank you.
Ed, do you want to go first, or would you like for me to lead the way and give you an example?
You lead the way.
Okay.
You're the experienced veteran.
So I bought Unmatched on a whim because I got an email from our local gaming store, Games and Stuff in Glen Burnie, Maryland, telling me that I had $80 in credit that I needed to spend off or it would go poof. And so I said to myself, I need to take advantage of this because that's my money and I don't want it going away. So I stopped in, I looked around, and I'd heard about Unmatched. I have memories of playing epic battles with John back in the day. I like some of the properties that were showing up, and they had a set out on the table for a show and tell. So I kind of played around with it, and I'm like, okay, this is something I could get behind. So I picked up the Legends 1 set, whatever the first base set is, and immediately took it home, pulled out the rule book, read through the rule book, immediately bought it on Steam as well, and played a few games of Steam just to kind of get my hands dirty. And, getting it to the table, I had a lot more fun than I actually thought I was going to. I mean, I thought I was going to have fun, but I really enjoyed this. So John, I know, has his hang-ups, and typically we agree on things. I think me and Sam are seeing kind of eye to eye, and I'm pretty sure Ed had a good time.
Mm-hmm. I generally have a good time.
Yeah. And we're glad to have you here, by the way.
Thank you. It was good to be here.
This is a perfect example of Kismet coming in the form of a 7. It was just something that I picked up on a whim, and I didn't know how it was going to go, and turns out it was a 7 all the way through. So I'm really glad that I was able to get this one to the table and just in the collection.
All right, Ed, what did you think?
I enjoyed it. I'm also a man of simple tastes. I thought I think I liked King Arthur from last time more than I liked Spike. Possibly just because I like my characters to hit people in the face with a sword.
Mm-hmm.
You're a history kind of guy.
I'm a history kind of
Yeah.
guy. So I think the combo where Merlin was ranged and King Arthur was melee was a little more effective than 2 melee characters. At least on this map, right? It was good to have both of them, and I could try to corral you guys, but half the time was just one person chasing after you guys to punch you in the face. But yeah, I had a lot of fun. I'm glad you didn't kite me around the second time, Sam, because I'm so angry about King Arthur last time when I should have had that. But yeah, simple man, simple 7.
All right, John, you easily took MVP of this last game, I think.
Just because I kept resurrecting people?
Yeah, you resurrected me twice.
This is whack-a-mole.
I have to vote. I have to give you MVP.
And my own sidekick once.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I had another one in my hand about the time I was dying.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
I
sort
have
of
to
crazy.
give you MVP.
Well,
I mean,
thank
I
you.
don't get MVP for actually killing you so many times.
No, I say you get the MVP on this team.
I can't give MVP for your team, Steven. Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks, Ed.
we'll each vote our own MVP. I think that seems pretty reasonable, the two sides of the board. So, you know, I complain. First of all, this is a true team game, and I always say I like true team games, so God bless it for that. This is a game that you can sit down, and especially if you got a little kid that's playing, if you're playing with your son or daughter, they're a little bit younger, you're in a position to coach and stuff like that, so it's nice. It's from a family perspective, it's nice that you can be there for somebody who probably can't do it on their own, so I'm a big fan of that. So first of all, I'm not a big fan of like Magic or Pokemon or that kind of thing where it's the card effects that are wiggling against each other and, you know, canceling each other out or trying to build off of each other. So, and I think the heart of this game is the deck. It's not the map. I think the map is just sort of an add-on. So, I'm a big fan of maps. These maps didn't really do it for me. So from that perspective, the game just didn't come alive for me. I don't think it's a bad game. It's yet another game with big asymmetry, which is the thing now, is that everybody is playing it by a different set of rules. The other game it reminds me of is Villainous, and it almost looks like it's sort of, they said,
See that?
boy, that Villainous really works. Maybe we can sell one of those and make some money off of that as well. It's just, it's obviously
Villainous
it's not the Disney
plays
theme.
totally differently.
Yeah, it's the feel is the same.
And
The
this is
genre the
also
same.
a restoration of a game from the early 2000s. So
Yeah, and frankly, I think they got a little, they overthought it. I think they would have done better on the more traditional maps from the original. You could have done this exact same game on that square grid with more open space. The ranged weapons can shoot clean across the board on that space, so you could find some very interesting things. And when you were moving, you always had to be keeping an eye on the two sidekicks that the other guy had, because even if they're on the far side of the board, they could shoot you with their laser or whatever. And so I think they gave away some of that life that comes out of that game. So Epic Duels, which is the harder one to find, that and Buffy was the other game I mentioned. Buffy is very easy to find if you're interested. Go look on eBay or go hit your local thrift store. You're going to find it soon enough. But it just sort of didn't ring the bell. So I realize that's a really, you know, I'm not providing a whole lot of justification for it other than saying it didn't do it for me.
That's enough.
But that's what it boiled down to. So this is a 7 wannabe for me. And I'm not going to turn down a game if you guys want to play again, and that's fine. I'm certainly going to try new characters pretty much every time, because I don't think this is the decks aren't complicated enough where you're going to say, I'm going to be a Willow player until I figure it out, because you're going to figure out Willow the first time you play her, or any other character.
Yeah.
So
second time you're going to be an expert in anybody.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think it's a light game, and I think it's doing a light game's work, and that's fine. If you're interested in cracking open a couple of brews and doing this, then it's the kind of game where maybe not being 100% on your game isn't going to affect your enjoyment of it too much.
Yeah, and you know the games weren't too long. I would say
No.
for a 4-player team game, it probably took us about 45 minutes to
I
an
would
hour.
guess 40. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know I can always go back and check the timestamps, but I really think that you know getting everything put together and picking the characters from start to finish probably under an hour. So I mean it says 20 minutes on the box, but I think a one-on-one battle would go 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
4 people, definitely not 20 minutes.
Depending on how many times you can resurrect.
Oh my god. How many times did I have to kill Samuel? I mean, I love killing Samuel in games, but that was...
Well, that's fundamentally, it's another cancel card. All this work that I did to kill that character, and there she is, right back on the board. Right
At least
where
it was
I left
only
her.
3 health. If it had been more than 3 health.
I appreciate the in-games caveat there, Steven. that one's doing a lot of work.
Sam, what do you got for us?
So, you know, I think as is fairly usual, I'm going to disagree with John, because I really liked this. I had a blast. I had a good time winning. I had a good time losing. Somehow, I even had a good time getting resurrected and then immediately killed off twice.
I wanted you to stay dead.
And you know what? That's fair.
You were the last person on your team.
I was somehow. Yeah. So I had a really good time with this. I felt like the map really made it click. I felt like it added a lot. The card play wasn't terribly complicated, but it was interesting. I think John's right. This is a light game, But there's a place for light games that you pull out and you knock it around for a bit and then you pack it away.
Going back to that, I appreciate the fact that the card play is very simple, but it feels like it's combo-y.
It has, there.
So you don't have to string together like 2 or 3 cards to get, the effects that you want.
Yeah.
Like it all comes boiled down into one card, which sounds weird, but it's just a feeling that I had. Like, like when you're playing your commander deck in Magic, it's like you've got that 4-card combo that can like really put a smack on somebody.
I think it's because almost every card in the deck. I mean, there are only a couple cards that were the same for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So almost every card in your deck is something that is unique and special to your character.
Mm-hmm.
Except those faint cards.
Well, it's the faint cards that everybody had, and there were the regroup cards that everybody had.
Right.
Mm.
But every other card in your deck was special and unique to your character, and they felt nice to play most of the time.
I would like to point out, T-Rex does not have a faint or a regroup.
Oh,
Wow.
See? He really is the boss character. But that's part of what makes the game fun.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because every card, basically, you're like, oh, what does this card do? That's cool. And there's only 2 or 3 of them, so each one feels like a limited resource. And there's teeth in the card management, where you're going to run out of cards, and then you're just not going to be able to block, and the game will end for you. And I enjoyed that, So, I think I've got to put this one in as a smooth 7. I would gladly have this on my shelf.
Awesome. Well, I think we've run this one through as much as we can. Does anyone have any parting thoughts before we ship this one out?
I want to play the T-Rex next time.
That should be easy.
I will make sure to pick a ranged character.
King Arthur versus the T-Rex.
That'd be
that's
interesting.
That'd be an interesting head-to-head.
The one thing I will mention real quick. Some of the boards are a little dark, but all the writing is real easy to see, even with my old eyes. So from a delivery perspective, I think they did a nice job. It's the usability on this game is very high. So I'll just mention that for people that have eyesight problems.
Yeah, and even the different colors have different textures.
Yeah.
So I'm not colorblind. I don't think anyone at the table is colorblind, but I feel like that would be very helpful to the colorblind type of people. So. Yeah, I think, the presentation here, there's a lot that they did right with the presentation
Mm-hmm.
here.
And the miniatures are nice, too.
Yeah.
The miniatures are nice. They got the colored bases that help you
identify who is
help
who.
identify.
And what is what.
The dials for tracking health were solid. And
then, the characters that needed special, pieces of cardboard had special pieces of cardboard. Like the Alice has a keyhole that shows her big and shows her small. And, Spike had his little shadow tokens. And then Willow has the little
Good Willow and
Good Willow, Bad Willow.
Oh, the insight tokens from Dr.
Yeah.
Sattler.
So, there's a lot going on here, and I think from a production standpoint, they've done everything right. So, bravo, Restoration Games, for really excellent production.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, thanks, guys.
Yep. Sounds good.